The beet work starts with the Alonso family that I know of. I know the Limon family also worked in the fields. They started in Wyoming. They worked for Cox and Fisher, but I don't know much more than that. I know more of the Alonso family. Um, Grandpa and Grandma Alonso, Pedro and Ricarda Alonso, started out in Minnesota, working up there. They traveled back and forth from Texas to Minnesota with 6 children. She originally had 12, but she lost 6. Not really sure from migrating back and forth or if it was to SIDS or what they were. I just know that she lost 6 children. It was a hard life moving back and forth. I know that at one point in time, my mother, Petra Alonso Limon, made mention that they lived in a railroad car when they were picking tomatoes. And it was literally an empty railroad car. No kitchen, no bathroom, no nothing. They all had literally mats or whatever, just sleeping on the floor. They had to find their own bathrooms. They had to take a tub and bring it inside like the old days, fill it with hot water from, putting pretty much a burning stove in a railroad car that was probably not really safe to do so because there was no chimney hole and pretty much not safe to make their own wood burning stove in it. But yeah. And then she met my dad through her sister, and they eloped and then moved to Pal, where he had been working in the beets. Then he started working for farmers, so they moved to Pal. And after they eloped, they lived here for 40-some years. Then my sister and I came along. They worked for a program called NowCap, and they met a bunch of migrants, and that's how we got introduced into the beet field. My sister and I, her nickname is Shorty. She's the older of the two of us, but she's 5'2", and I'm 5'8", hence the nickname of Shorty. Mom worked for NowCap, which is a program for migrants. They would come from Texas and they would need help with housing or food or clothing or doctor's appointments, and Mother would help them find those kind of programs. And Dad worked for NowCap as well, but he worked with weatherization. If they lived in a migrant house that didn't have good windows or good doors or something to that nature, Dad would take care of that. He would make the doors, the windows, or what have you, and the farmers were ecstatic because it was pretty much a free program. And as Mom was going around doing that, they would go out into the fields and meet the families, and we would go with them. In order for NowCap to continue to prosper, they had to get numbers of migrant families. And every year the numbers had to go up in order for the program to continue to get the grants. So Mom and Dad literally worked overtime every summer to get the numbers. And we met several families. We grew close to the Casares and the Garcias. They were really large families that would come up every year. And we were, 13 and 15. And, well, maybe younger than that because she hadn't hit her quince yet. Anyway, we were preteen and we wanted certain clothing. And Mother said that if we wanted certain clothing that was more expensive than she was willing to pay, that we needed to work out in the beet fields so we could earn extra money. And And we stupidly said, okay, why not? Let's try it. We started out with the Casares family. And getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And the family would be waiting for us. Dad would take us over there and drop us off at 4 o'clock. Sun was not even out, but the only reason we would get up as early as that is because it was cool enough to start working. So by the time the sun actually came out and started beating down really hot, it was time to go home. So you were working extremely hot hours. The worst part of it is the gnats. Those little tiny bugs, you cannot actually wear like off or any bug spray to get them to go away. They buzz in your ears. They buzz everywhere. Walking the rows was not too bad. You had to wear long jeans and make sure you pick up your feet. If you didn't, you would trip and fall. That took a while for my sister to get used to because she had a habit of dragging her feet. And she kept tumbling. I wasn't so bad. It took a couple of steps to get used to, but it's kind of like stepping through snow. So you're dragging your feet, pulling your feet forward, but you get used to it. It wasn't too bad. But for the first week, every time I closed my eyes to go to sleep, I saw beets. I don't know how these families do it. Constantly coming up here and constantly following the harvest. It's not something that a family should do. I mean, they leave their home early to come up here so their children don't actually finish out the school year. They come up here. So they get no recognition for finishing school. Some of them don't even get to graduate. They get to finish school early and get their diploma, but they don't get to do the commencement speech or do the commencement to graduate. So they're just headed their diploma and then they leave the high school and they're done. They don't get the cap and gown. They don't get the ceremony. They're just pretty much done. Or they get their GED up here, which mom helps them get. So we went to the next family, which was the Garcias. That's when the stories turned different. They became a lot more entertaining. The Garcia boys were, how do I put this? Egotistical maniacs. They were very, very masculine. The women belonged barefoot and in the kitchen. They had 2 sisters that came up to work with them. And they brought cousins all the time. They were a very, very huge family. I could not even tell you how many children were with them. I just remember all the cousins. We would get up and go to work with them. And we would get up at 4 o'clock. We would be taken over to them. And we looked like this huge herd of cattle just going in to the back of a beet truck at 4 o'clock. Because they literally had to take the back of the truck, put it down, so we could climb in to this beet truck. And then they'd put the door up like a cattle truck. We'd get to the field that we were going to, and they drop the thing down again, and here goes all the cattle again out of the truck. It was just so weird. Then we'd get to the field, and we'd all start the same. All in the rows. Everybody's at the beginning. And then we'd all go out like a grid and start at different levels. It was just like a fluctuating grid line. It was very weird. Some of us were faster. Some of us were slower. It was just very interesting how it's like a high school. The little cliques of the 2 brothers over here, or the brother and the sister in one spot. My sister staying with one girl, or my sister talking to another person. My sister attached herself to Dolores, was her name. But they called her Loli. So she would hang around with Loli more than anything else. And the other sister, Olga, would work with my mom. My mom was teaching her office skills. That way she would not have to work in the beet field. So when then she got back to Texas, she could find an office job and not have to migrate into the fields. The brothers were always competing. They were always egotistical. I was a tomboy, so I was pretty much in and out of whichever group. I didn't really fit into any group. I was kind of weird. So we did cleaning of the beet fields. We got paid $5 an hour. There were literally no bathrooms. We were lucky if we could find a cornfield to go to the bathroom in, or a ditch. If we did not have either or, then we had to make sure the boys couldn't see us, or we couldn't see them behind a truck or a tire. So it was very interesting to go to the bathroom. The spacing is what we called it. The saiche is where you space the beets. You'd go in and make sure the beets weren't touching each other. So when you go back and do the cleaning, the limpia, it would be easier to get the weeds out. When you're doing the spacing, you get paid by the acre. So you had to be really quick so you could make a lot of money, so you weren't losing time. I do have a funny story of the fields being cleaned and measuring up to the boys. Regret now, but it was fun then. We had to go clean out a field of sunflowers. And the boys were sent ahead to go do it. And I thought, well, it can't be that difficult. They're sunflowers. They're not too bad. So I, being the tomboy that I was, went and started pulling sunflowers. And the boys are like, this is for men. You can't do it. This is a guy's job. It's like, yeah, really? Watch me. I already pulled 3 back there. So it became a competition with the boys. They were always competing with each other. So I started yanking sunflowers. Had no problem. It was not that big of a deal. They just, for some reason, thought girls couldn't do it. Then it was like, oh, okay, you're so tough. We're going to do hay bales tomorrow. I was like, all right. It's no big deal. I can do hay bales. Next day, I stupidly agreed to do the hay bales. Not that big of a deal. Wasn't that hard either. That night, I regretted it, but I did not say a thing the next day to them. My body was crying in every shape and size. Legs, back, arms. Then I went to work in the beet fields the next day. They were like, oh, your body hurt last night, huh? It's like, nope, I was fine. It was no big deal. Was not going to admit to the boys that my body hurt. It was not that bad. It's just muscles that you don't normally use. But the Garcia boys were playing basketball. They would literally, they're brothers, but they would beat each other up. The thing people need to understand is the fields are not an easy job. Simon Dominguez was my first husband. He and his family came up and worked in the fields for a long time. They worked for a farmer named Corquiando. He would literally fall asleep in the field cleaning the rows. He would walk because he was tired, and he would walk in the row but not actually clean it because he was asleep. Simon did not get a chance to graduate. Neither did his brother Abel. They came up here to Wyoming. They both got their GEDs. His brother Abel is now an ICU DON nurse not sure if he's in McAllen or Harlingen now in Texas. Simon unfortunately passed away. He was working for Coca-Cola. He got a CDL license. He was doing very well. But they did not get a chance to graduate because they would migrate back and forth. They lost a lot of time with their peers because they had to leave very early to come up here and do the beet work. They didn't get to have their Catholic communions or anything related to the religion for Catholicism. He missed his first communion. He missed his confirmation. The only thing that they actually got was their baptism, because that they can do at any point in time when they're an infant. But the first communion had to be done at a certain time. Their confirmations had to be done at a certain time. So they had to do all of that up here, because they would bring nuns and a priest to come up here and do Mass in Spanish. And then at that point in time, they would do the confirmations and the first communions to migrants that missed it in Texas. They would give classes. They would go out to the homes and do that. They would recruit mom and dad to help them get introduced to the families. So working out in the fields is not something that should be taken as like, oh, it's not that difficult. It is very difficult for the families that lose out at home. I mean, the sunburns that you can get are horrid. I never wore a cap or covered anything on my face. I got blisters on my ears from how sunburned they got. I wear sunglasses to this day, and I make, my son Ismael wears sunglasses. He's been wearing them since he was about 1 year old. I didn't wear any eye covering. My eyeballs, believe it or not, got sunburned. They turned beet red, but then when I could turn my eye up or down, the rest of my eye was white. Oddly enough, sunburned. So that is tragic enough. I mean, the Garcia family had a house. They did not have running water inside the house. They did not have a bathroom inside the house. Their bathroom was in the middle, outside. It wasn't a porta potty or anything. It was actually a bathroom, but like that you get at a college dorm. They had to go outside to use the facilities, and sometimes they did not go outside. So they had buckets inside to go to the bathroom because they did not want to get up and go outside. So there's a lot that they put up with. I mean, it's just not the same as being home. And then the Garcia family actually lost one of the children up here. He had a horrible accident that they still can't understand what happened. He died up here in Wyoming. So, I mean, there's tragedy all the way around. Cultures are different. The hatred of races here. Watching the Garcia family during the fair was not very pretty with the race. All of them were very, very dark-skinned. But the boys would always go out, and it was horrid to see how they're treated. They come up here to do the job that nobody else wants to do at $5 an hour in the heat, where you're hoping for a nice cool breeze to come across or some sort of shade, and it doesn't happen. It's just unbelievable about how they get treated. We go to the fair, and they're called, spics, wetbacks, and it's just amazing that, they don't want them to react. The white guys are just walking around, the preps, however you want to call them, are just walking around trying to, be all macho and call them names. And then when the Garcia boys react, they get upset. And these boys were not tiny by any means. I remember Tani is his name, but his real name was Francisco Atanasio Garcia. Really pretty name. they literally had to hold him back because he wanted to go after the poor white boy. And I say poor white boy because if he had gotten loose, it would not have been pretty. But working in the fields is difficult. I just wish people would understand. Standing in the beet fields, I usually would look up at the sky hoping that the clouds would come across the sun and it would give us a moment of shade just for a few moments to get away from that glaring sun. I felt like an ant under glass. And at some point in time, you would see the breeze get ready to come because you could see the leaves moving across the beet field, or about across the leaves of the beets, and just hope that breeze was nice and cool. And then you'd feel it, and it's like, oh, it's hot air. It's not cool. And then you'd see the gray clouds coming, and you're, rain. We're going to get rained out. It's going to get muddy. We get to go home. No, it would just spit drizzle, and it's like, nope, keep going. It's like, damn it. I enjoyed the beet fields very, very much. It was a learning process because we were not raised to do manual labor. Our parents did not want us to work in the beet fields at all. Mom and Dad wanted us to work indoors and not out in the field like they did. They had it hard and did not want us to do the same. And nowadays, the machines do it all. There's no families anymore that come up. The revenue for that is gone for the families, and it was a good economy for them. It's missed money for the families and a missed culture.
Migrant to me, it means nomad, leaving home behind, taking only that is important and needed. Working in the fields, we did it for extra money so that we could go to fair and to buy graduation stuff. For me, it was for graduation. And I worked in the field with sugar beets, barley, and beans. And the beans were the worst because you always tripped and fell because of the stupid vines right in front of your feet. Yeah. And the reason kids don't go to work at the grocery store and restaurants or stuff like that is because parents probably wouldn't let you. You had to work with them so they could see that you're working, not running around doing something you're not supposed to be doing. You had to be there under their eye all the time. And I wish people would really understand that. Yeah, they come over and take your jobs, but whose job did they take when they're out there in the fields, in the sun, in the heat, working in the rain, in the wind, in the cold? I know I don't see very many lawyers out there picking grapes, oranges, out there hoeing the beets. I don't see any of them doing that. And I don't understand what jobs they're taking from them. Just a good story is everyone laughing at me because they couldn't find me in the beets because I was hiding in a tall patch of weeds. And when you're only 5 feet tall, you can easily hide and nobody will see you. And I hid in the weeds so nobody could see me for a little while. And my sister telling the family that we worked with that catfish went meow underwater. And they believed her. That was the really funny part. Family history of working in the fields. Our parents were immigrants. They were migrants. The story is told that when my dad asked my mom to marry him, she said yes. He drove from Wyoming to Texas in a day and a half so that they could get married and come back. And that's why we live here now, because our dad liked the way things were here. He liked the job. He liked the work. So he liked it here, and this is where he decided to raise a family. So that's why some of us are still here. Even now, we're the second generation to live here. And my relationship to an agriculture migrant worker, I married one. He was not the nicest person in the world, but he did He was out there working when he was really young. Out there in the sun and the heat all day, every day, no matter what. Even if it's your birthday, you're out there working in the fields.